People say he transcends the realm of the human, for his knowledge, compassion, and achievements seem to reach beyond what is humanly possible. In just 17 years, he created thousands of English terms to express Buddhist concepts from scratch, established 200 meditation centers across North America, and established 2 of the world's largest spiritual programs with over 5,000 seminars. He founded a liberal arts university in the US, trained a group of hippies and drug addicts to manage organizations that would go on to benefit millions, and set up a publication that produced over 6,000 titles. Some of his books were translated into 30 languages and sold in millions of copies. These all took place in 1960s America, where Buddhism was virtually unknown. Yet wherever he went, a Buddhist center soon sprang up and flourished. His magnetic charisma touched people's hearts instantly.
Spirituality at this point, in this particular class, I feel very nervous myself, and so should you, that we are not building mutual deceptions between each other.
Many of his disciples, deeply rooted in Christian traditions, passed down for generations, converted to Buddhism just days after meeting him. This wasn't a passing phase. Decades later, many remain devoted to the path he illuminated and are passing down his legacy to the next generations. This legendary figure is Chogyam Trungpa, a major tulku or incarnate teacher who held both the Kagyu and Nyingma lineages of Tibetan Buddhism. Besides bringing the authentic Tibetan teachings, Trungpa sharply pointed out the importance of cutting the bullshit on the spiritual path. In the US, spirituality usually bore the connotation of peaceful mind, calmness, and relaxation. However, these are just shells to extend our ego even more. As he put it, ego loves to wait in ambush to appropriate spirituality for its own survival and gain.
Let us mock the ego, but let us build our spirit.
His unequivocal approach brought refreshing inspirations to leaders and innovators in the West. High on Steve Jobs' list of recommended spiritual books is Trungpa's Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, where the common pitfall on the spiritual path was pointed out. What Trungpa terms
spiritual materialism.
He did not give a talk in the first 5 or 6 or 8 years without reminding people how foolish their grappling after spirituality to save themselves was. He was cruel from the point of view of relentlessly dismantling whatever you could use to cling on to some constructed version of ego.
He warns that the ego has a way of co-opting even spirituality for its own purposes, turning the journey inward into a pursuit of self-improvement, a futile effort to enhance the very ego that is, at its core, empty. Trungpa urges us to awaken from these illusions and confront the deeper truths of the spiritual path. Nonetheless, his name traveled far beyond the avant-garde spiritual community in America. He spearheaded a movement that bridged the East and West and revolutionized Buddhism globally. The short 17 years he lived in Western countries prepared the ground for Buddhism to flourish in the coming decades. But much of the spotlight has focused on his vibrant and controversial personal life. Headlines often buzzed with stories of his unconventional lifestyle. It's well known that he married a British woman from a wealthy family, had relationships with more than 100 girlfriends, got drunk and high on weed often, and ran his organizations with thousands of hippies and even drug addicts. Tenzin Palmo, one of the first Western to be ordained as a Buddhist nun, named to the BBC's 100 Women list, lived in a cave in the Himalayas measuring 10 feet wide and 6 feet deep for 12 years. She also told the story of Trungpa hitting on her.
I, at that time, was 19. And let's say he didn't act in an appropriate manner for a monk. On the other hand, he lost out because he kept presenting himself as being this pure monk who, until he met me, had never been tempted, but now. And I thought, yeah, right. But I thought he probably was a pure monk because he'd just come from India and he had never had any opportunities. I didn't realize he already had fathered a child. So I was not going to cause a pure monk to lose their ordination. So there was no way. If he had said, look here, I've been having women since I was 13, I would have said, okay, let's go with it.
This wasn't just any man. He was the 11th in the line of Trungpa Tulkus, a revered figure in the Kagyu lineage, deeply trained in the ancient traditions of Tibetan Buddhism, and earned his Khenpo degree at a young age. So even to this day, his unconventional behaviors continue to draw intense criticism within the Buddhist community. One story goes like this. When he was seriously in Canada, his disciples went to ask, Rinpoche, what can we do to make you live longer? Trungpa Rinpoche joked that he needed 100 women, or dakinis. Disciples said, you write the list and they will arrange it. Trungpa Rinpoche deliberately wrote down the names of many people who had husbands, and he knew that the husbands were very jealous. But everyone was ready to give his wife to the guru. Of course, Trungpa Rinpoche didn't do anything. But this shows how much faith and confidence his disciples had in him.
But despite that, I felt this was the real thing. That despite the fact he was not at all my idea of how a Lama should be acting, there was something about him underlying all that which was very, very special. So then he started just on a basic Mahamudra teaching. But then at some point he said to me, anyway, I'm not your Lama's in India, so you will meet him there, and so you have to go. So I did.
You may say they were just a bunch of hippies and didn't have the wisdom to see through his brainwash. But in fact, there were no lack of professors from Ivy League schools, accomplished philosophers, and famous writers and poets among his disciples. Furthermore, not only nonconformists admired him zealously, many of the world's most reputable Buddhist masters who have deep roots in the East have given him highest praises. Dzongsar Jamyang Khyentse Rinpoche, one of the world's most popular Buddhist masters with hundreds of thousands of disciples, head of 3 large-scale monasteries with 3,000 monks, once said,
"But I would not dare to compare myself with Chogyam Trungpa. He's like the sun. I'm like a small firefly. I pray that I can follow. Me imitating Trungpa Rinpoche is like some stupid artist imitating Picasso."
In addition, Khenpo Sodargye, the Tibetan guru who was most admired for his remarkable academic excellence and diligence in keeping with Buddhist precepts, also shed tears when publicly commemorating Trungpa Rinpoche's contributions. Dharma King Jigme Phuntsok, the most influential Lama of the Nyingma school of Tibetan Buddhism, who established Sirtha Buddhist Institute in 1980 with approximately 10,000 monks and nuns studying there, talked about Trungpa Rinpoche in a Buddhist center in Canada. He said, "When I hear about Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche's initial efforts to spread the Dharma here, I sometimes feel especially sad. I think that it was very difficult for him to come to such a foreign country and build everything bit by bit, brick by brick. At other times, I feel immense joy, marveling at his incredible actions, perseverance, and unwavering heart." Even Dalai Lama, the highest spiritual leader, virtually a king and a diplomat, also defended Trungpa when the Japanese Zen master publicly criticized the unrestrained behaviors of Trungpa and explicitly asked for Dalai Lama's input.
I heard both sides. Even is my late guru, the Khyentse Rinpoche, Khyentse Rinpoche. Once, you see, he also, I discuss, or I casually mention about it. And he say, "Oda de nanda zuni Khyentse shibistus, and Koranchik nyamnini chiyanchik sabu yebesostus, what is to do?"
Khyentse Rinpoche said that, well, that's true. Some of the things that he has done are pretty outrageous, quite difficult to understand, but at the same time, he was someone who seemed to have a certain degree of realization.
From leader to refugee. Imagine being recognized as the reincarnation of a revered Buddhist master as an infant. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, born in 1940, was destined for greatness. As the 11th incarnation in the renowned Trungpa lineage, his path was set from birth, not just as the head of the Surmang monasteries, but also as the governor of the Surmang region. Trungpa's childhood was far from ordinary. From 1945 to 1958, he trained intensely under some of Tibet's greatest living masters, including his root guru Jamgon Kongtrul of Session and the revered Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. He was also guided by the enigmatic Khenpo Gangshar, known for his crazy wisdom. These early influences shaped Trungpa into the visionary leader who would later bring Tibetan Buddhism to the West. On April 23, 1959, at the age of 20, Trungpa embarked on a perilous escape from Tibet, risking everything to flee his homeland under siege. During those 9 harrowing months, Trungpa led 300 others through the unforgiving Himalayas. The journey began a year earlier, when the Chinese People's Liberation Army seized control and destroyed his home monastery. Forced to leave everything behind, Trungpa led his people to safety. What started as a small group of monks quickly grew as desperate villagers, including the Queen of Nangchen, joined the trek. But their growing numbers brought challenges: slow progress, treacherous terrain, and the constant threat of capture. They were forced to abandon their animals and travel on foot through untracked mountain wilderness, often moving under the cover of night to avoid detection. After months of grueling travel, the group reached the Brahmaputra River, only to be met with heavy gunfire. Yet Trungpa and about 70 others managed to cross the river, surviving on nothing but leather belts and bags as they scaled 19,000 feet over the Himalayas. Finally, on January 24th, 1960, they found refuge in India, where they were flown to safety. Years later, satellite imagery confirmed Trungpa's escape route, comparing his journey to legendary survival sagas like Shackleton's Antarctic expedition. The group endured freezing temperatures, deep snow, sweltering heat, jungle humidity, treacherous narrow paths, and at times no paths at all. All the while, they lived in constant fear, knowing that communist troops could ambush them at any moment. During the escape, many of his people were killed by the communists. Yet Trungpa firmly instructed that no one in his group should kill even one communist. This showed his gentle heart, even toward his fiercest enemies. As he once said in his teachings, the ideal of warriorship is that the warrior should be sad and tender, and because of that, the warrior can be very brave as well. From a highly worshipped religious master and political leader in his homeland to a refugee, Trungpa Rinpoche demonstrated the impermanence and ever-changing nature of life. As he put it himself, the bad news is you're falling through the air, nothing to hang on to, no parachute. The good news is there's no ground. Crazy wisdom in the West. Imagine how challenging it was to teach Buddhism during Trungpa's time. Even for the simplest concept, he had to single-handedly create nuances, terms, language, atmosphere, discipline, and stages of practice for new Dharma students. In 1969, Trungpa founded Shambala Publications, a cornerstone of spiritual literature with a catalog of over 1,600 titles. Many of Trungpa Rinpoche's own books resonated deeply with readers, selling millions of copies and continuing to inspire generations. His teachings, blending mindfulness with the modern world, continue to influence some of the most innovative minds today.
I have a very, very active mind.
Yes.
And actually meditation changed my life.
I took on meditation.
When do you meditate?
20 minutes a day in the morning and at night. And it was necessary.
The Beatles were very popular, and then they went to India and they meditated, and then that became very well known. So I decided, I was in my teens, I suppose, I don't know what I was, but I was young, early college, and then I went to learn how to do it, and then it was life-changing.
In 1973, Trungpa founded Vajradhatu, a national and later international organization that became the nerve center for his expansive Buddhist work.
Particular artistic things we're doing.
Growing to encompass about 100 meditation centers and several residential retreat facilities worldwide. Sarah Coleman, a longtime student and senior editor for Trungpa Rinpoche, detailed the 13 three-month seminaries he led in the 1970s and 80s, from Teton Village to the Rocky Mountain Dharma Center. She described how the different themes of his seminars brought together the multifaceted teachings. Sarah mentioned that the program's progress was tremendous every year.
Things grew so fast, it was unbelievable. Ram Dass came, this story has been told many times. We thought there were going to be 200 people, then there were 2,000, it just blew up. But this man never stopped. He never stopped. So.
However, when Rinpoche went on a retreat after 7 years of establishing the program, things spiraled out of control. Yet he never pointed fingers or blamed anyone. He waited until the situation became obvious, then quickly reorganized the system by sending letters to key people.
And he never interfered. I only saw him say no about 3 times in all the years. And this is one of the times he said no, but he waited a long time.
His heart was so open and compassionate that he didn't feel the need to control or micromanage any situation out of fear of it getting off track. As Trungpa once said, you work with existing situations without fear, without any doubt about involving yourself. This approach is extremely creative and positive. If you have definite confidence, you are so sure of yourself that you do not have to check yourself. It is absolute confidence, a real understanding of what is going on now. Therefore, you do not hesitate to follow other paths or deal in whatever way is necessary with each new situation. Diana Mukpo, his wife, mentioned that Rinpoche was always eager for feedback.
Many public people have one persona when they're out teaching in public and another persona at home, but he was always the same person. And I think that was very powerful for people when they met Rinpoche, that he was so genuine from his heart, always, in every circumstance.
And encouraged his students to think critically. It was one of the many ways he connected deeply with people.
We're comparing our itineraries, and I said, don't you get tired of constantly going around? I'm getting a little tired of running around. He said, oh, that's because you don't like your poetry. I said, what do you know about my poetry? And he said, well, why don't you do like the great poets of old, like Milarepa? Why don't you just get up on stage and compose on the tone? Why do you need a piece of paper? Don't you trust your own mind?
In 1974, Trungpa took a bold step by founding Naropa University, the first Buddhist-inspired college in the United States. During the first year alone, he gave Vajrayana teachings to about 700 people, began digitizing Buddhist materials, and from there, things just took off. Then, in 1976 and 77, he launched the Shambala program, inspired by the legendary kingdom of Shambala. This program taught meditation based on the principle of basic goodness, and approached it in a secular way that resonated with many. Trungpa firmly believed that an enlightened society wasn't just a dream, but something achievable through mindfulness and awareness, helping individuals connect with their inherent goodness. By 1978, the seminars had become more structured, with strict disciplines and a rigorous application process to offer students more formal training. The Shambala program didn't just stop there. It transformed countless lives, including that of Pema Chodron, who went on to become an internationally best-selling and well-known Buddhist teacher.
I was given an article, and it happened to be by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who ultimately became my teacher. And this article was called Working with Negativity. And in that, he said, there is nothing wrong with negativity per se. He says it's actually a powerful energy. It's actually very juicy and creative. It can wake you up. He said the problem is negative negativity, which is like all the spin-off from negativity. Blaming the other person or blaming yourself or the endless spin-off. But what he was saying was that the energy itself was, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's helpful. And I always say, I don't understand why that made such an impression on me, because I've been trying to understand that article ever since. A year later, actually, I became a nun, believe it or not. I was a fast mover.
In addition, Trungpa established a wide range of organizations and training programs, ranging from a meditation council and a credit union to a preschool and elementary school. His initiatives also included an association for health professionals, a translation committee, and cultural groups focused on the study and practice of tea ceremony, Japanese archery, flower arranging, and dressage. Over 17 years of relentless dedication in North America, Trungpa Rinpoche accomplished the extraordinary. He didn't just introduce Buddhism, he wove it into the fabric of Western life.